Hi, my name is Aliyyah Hamid, and this talk is dedicated to my father, Dr. Muhammad Hamid. He is humble, kind, and gentle-spoken, but also surprisingly artistic and witty. In the late 80s, when he was in his 20s, he came to the U.S. with his brother from Karachi, Pakistan, in order to finish his education as a physician. In 1989, he married my mother, Dr. Rafia Hamid, who was also kind and soft-spoken, but courageous and intelligent. My father went on to become an internist and my mother a psychologist. Initially, my family was tight on money, from education loans to supporting visiting relatives. As an immigrant without established generational wealth, my father worked many extra shifts and long hours at several hospitals. Actually, he decided not to pursue a fellowship that would support his efforts to become a specialist, mainly because of the financial burden and his overwhelming exhaustion. Like many doctors, he worked night shifts, which is a dangerous buzzword I will throw around a lot. Yet, despite these difficulties, my father expressed an immense dedication to his job. One night, when I was much younger, my father received a call from the hospital. The working physician on call had refused to provide a patient in need of urgent care because the patient was uninsured. My father, who was the only other available physician, was asked to drive to the hospital in order to admit this patient. Even though it was 40 minutes away from our home, my father agrees. My mother, who told me the story, out of concern for my father's sleep, asked, "Why would you go out of your way to do such a thing?" To which my father replies, "Money or no money, I'm a doctor." It was often that I didn't interact enough with my father on a day-to-day basis. He wasn't neglectful at all, and he always thought of us. We would try to go on a fishing trip and picnic every year with his other Pakistani American class fellows. I remember seeing my father rushing in the morning and then napping in the afternoon, snoring and slouched in his chair, and then back to the clinic at night, where he would come home late or be on call for a good portion of the night. His daily schedule consisted of him waking up at 6 a.m., making his rounds at 3 hospitals, depending on the day, and then attending necessary meetings, then a nursing home, and then his private practice. In his efforts to serve people, he often neglected his sleep. At night, he would be on call, admitting patients into the hospital, causing him to wake up 10 to 15 different times a night. Well, you may be thinking that I still have the fishing trips to look forward to. Now that I'm older, there may be other ways I can bond with him, like over his favorite action movies like Mission Impossible. Unfortunately, in the fall of 2016, when I was 10, my father was diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme. Glioblastoma multiforme, or GBM, is essentially a term for a type of brain tumor. After 11 months of chemotherapy, seizures, in the wheelchair, which he was dependent on since his entire left side was paralyzed, he passed away in September 2017. Throughout his illness, my family and I had constant hope that my father would be able to walk and be himself again. His passing was never a thought that crossed my mind. My family never used the word cancer, and I didn't even learn it was cancer until halfway through his illness. After his discharge from the hospital around January 2017, he even started physical therapy. There was a point where he could walk, if just for a brief moment again. With the progression of his illness, my father, in his late 50s, looked 20 years older. He grew a beard, shaved his head, and was terribly frail and helpless. An 11-year-old, seeing your parent or guardian, someone who is an integral part of your life and your heart, who is supposed to be strong and resilient, experience cancer is unfathomable, almost paradigm shifting. Naturally, my emotional maturity quickened, but even with the stressful environment, my mom leaving her job, my older brothers pausing their college education, and dealing with new house members like relatives and aides, wasn't enough to completely transform me. I was still a child. I remember one time where my father, who was resting in bed, asked for the dry fruit tray, so I traveled to the kitchen and back to retrieve it, and I leave the tray on his bed, which is my mistake because once I've left the room, all the dry fruit spilled over his bed and onto the floor. I remember being chastised and briefly grounded by a relative and seeing that my father couldn't even pick up the almonds, pistachios, and walnuts that he loved so much. But my father's illness isn't merely a paradigm shift. It's a story of many physicians and service workers with stressful hours and beloved family members, of night shift work and lost time. Declared a probable carcinogen by the CDC in 2007, night shift work is strongly linked with cancer, particularly breast cancer in women and prostate cancer in men. Night shift work is also linked with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, stomach ulcers, and gastrointestinal issues. These are attributed because stress, which is associated with night shift work, triggers unhealthy habits such as a poor diet, overeating, and a sedentary lifestyle. To provide a real-world example, a sedentary lifestyle is something I observed in my father, and there have been many times that I know of in my life where, after studying for a test until the break of dawn or writing a paper, that I went to the kitchen and ate much more than a scoop of ice cream. Night shift work also damages the circadian rhythm, which are the physical, behavioral, and mental changes that follow a 24-hour day-night cycle, such as our sleep schedule and other components of our biological clocks, which regulate key biological functions based on inherent timings built into our DNA. In a study published in the Journal of Pineal Research, researchers uncovered that it was the underlying damage to the cellular circadian rhythm by night shift work which triggers cancer. The study uncovered that cumulative long-term night shift work induced DNA damage and impaired the repair of many cancer-related genes. Essentially, a devastated rhythmicity of the internal biological cycles occurred. Surmounting evidence suggests night shift work decreases overall longevity and increases all-cause mortality. A study conducted in 2001 questioned women with and without breast cancer on their lifestyle habits. Women with breast cancer were far more likely to report sleeping as late as 2 a.m., work night shifts, and be exposed to bright lights at night. Accordingly, the effects of night shift work is exacerbated by bright light exposures, and 99% of the U.S. population lives in light pollution, which is one of the reasons why it is so important to minimize use before going to bed. These bright light exposures can contribute to cancer in and of themselves. Another study conducted in 2001 uncovered that blind women are less susceptible to breast cancer than sighted women. This is because light exposure induces decreased melatonin production, which helps you fall asleep. This thereby increases estrogen production, which increases the risk of a breast cancer tumor developing. So the fact that night shift work contributes to 12,000 new cases of breast cancer every year shouldn't come as a surprise, and yet it is. Night shift work not only induces cancer and damages your future, the future of your loved ones, but it damages your present. If you're a student, you may have heard that sleeping is part of studying. When you sleep, you are optimizing your memory and your critical thinking. Moreover, there is an entire sleeping disorder coined after night shift work, literally called shift work sleeping disorder, or SWSD. This can cause an individual to have insomnia and a decreased ability to concentrate, as well as be more accident-prone and irritable. Accordingly, SWSD can be linked to depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. So yes, definitely try to get the best of your recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. In the context of my father, physicians as a whole are also at risk for cancer because they generally have greater exposure to carcinogenic drugs, infection, radiation, and poor lifestyle habits. Immigrants like my father are 17% more likely to work night shifts, and yet these stressful exposures, which were a probable factor in my father's diagnosis of GBM, don't stop with him. With any loss, there are lasting implications. My father was diagnosed with GBM a year after my mother underwent a significant surgery to treat a serious illness. Not yet completely recovered from physically carrying my father in and out of the wheelchair to financially and emotionally supporting my family, where there were many late nights involved, her health has also declined. Of course, in our modern society, night shift work cannot be entirely avoided, especially for essential workers and those in financial situations where they may have to take a late shift. But it is an exposure that affects all of us. For students such as myself, who may pull frequent all-nighters, I should reconsider my habits and schedule burden. Given young people are still developing, it is imperative that late nights are avoided and deterred. For instance, staying up until 3 a.m. on TikTok doesn't only mess up your sleep schedule, but it damages your circadian rhythm and development, despite the fact that you may not be working. According to the CDC, 73% of adolescents don't get enough sleep every night. Before you go to bed, minimize your exposure to your cell phone. Not only will this give you a more restful sleep, but you will also be maintaining your natural biological cycles. Increasing positive exposures, ranging from exercise and a healthy diet to minimizing caffeine and slowly adjusting to a late shift schedule, are other possible interventions which can diminish the detriment of night shift, which may not always be in our control. When all is said and done, however, what if the ticking time bomb of these stressors could be balanced with another solution, a simpler one? It may not increase our time, but time that is cherished and remembered. Simply step away from the report, step away from the computer, and spend time with your loved ones. Build connection and conversation. Be vulnerable and true now. Even if in small increments, this too increases with effect exponentially. Though cliche, life is mercurial, and environmental health can provide insight as to the power of our lifestyle, which may not always be in our control. But night shift work and our lifestyle can result in a single parent who stresses out when I'm stressed, who's happy when I'm happy, for my mother wearing herself out in order to support her children. Or it could mean the individual responsible for half of my genetic material, for my eyes and passion, for my father being absent at my high school graduation and the rest of my life's milestones. My father no longer able to show me this world through his eyes. I would be ungrateful if I said I had no good memories of my father, but for a while after his passing, his helpless state was my only resounding memory of him. I couldn't really say much as at the bereavement group meetings for kids like me that my mother would take me to, but I do remember how he would sit with my younger brother and I for hours on Eids and birthdays in order to build the Legos, or his barbecues and the Barbies he bought me, or the time where he spent time to cut out duct tape in order to spell a Be Yourself message, an attempt to make a positive message shirt for a school pride day, and his sacrifice to the well-being of the community and his patients. Beyond family life, my patient, humble, and selfless father had a respectable legacy. At his janazah or funeral prayer, there was so much traffic around the mosque that they closed down the road because so many of his friends, community members, and former patients came. My father worked with the Association of Physicians of Pakistani Descent of North America, or APNA, which provided housing for immigrants, doctors, and provided service to underserved neighborhoods. When my father was thanked for his work by a former patient, he replied, "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to earn a good deed." While he was sick, he never uttered "why me," and he took everything bravely in stride. If only I could have recognized that bravery then. Recently, my family and I discovered old cassette tapes holding videos of my father and my young family pre-Aliyyah. Despite the fact that he isn't here in this world, I can still continue to know him. My father also lives on in my writings and poems, in my devotion towards my education and budding advocacy, and my love for my family, culture, and faith. Here is an excerpt from a poem I wrote dedicated to my father, or as I affectionately call him, my Abu. A figment of my childhood, we would go fishing every year. Father's Day, salt air, seagulls screeching, holding your hand as I crossed because I was afraid of falling between the deck and the boat. My small hands over yours as you reeled in a fish, claiming it was mine. We climbed up steep steps and ate cake together. Those doctor visits in the city meant for me. I wanted to hold Mom's hand, but my little brother came first, so I reluctantly held yours. I would never let go now if it were up to me. I remember one time you brought ice cream, strawberry stains all over my hands and face, in protest for chocolate. I was 4. I remember singing to you as I clutched a hairbrush in my hands, snuggling between you and Mom when the nightmares came. Your snores disturbed the tranquility of night. My hands over my ears. Now the silent nights, strumming of now sprouted conflict, have become woefully familiar. This is my story. My name is Aliyyah Hamid, only sister of Ammar, Azam, and Amir Hamid, and only daughter of Doctors Muhammad and Rafia Hamid. I'm kind and soft-spoken like my parents, courageous and ambitious like my mother, and artistic and dedicated like my father. I want my story, my father's story, and the stories of countless essential workers and immigrants to be a symbol of how our lifestyle today compounds and affects exponentially. So why don't you go and spend some time with your loved ones right now? Thank you.